Coming up on 5-Minute News. Biden calls Trump a toxic presence, encouraging violence in America. France's Macron returns to Beirut to press for reform. And US administration finalizes coal plant pollution rollback. It's Tuesday, September 1. I'm Anthony Davis. The battle over who can keep Americans safe after recent deadly protests emerged on Monday as the sharpest dividing line for the presidential campaign's final weeks, as Joe Biden condemned the violence and Donald Trump defended a supporter accused of fatally shooting 2 men. While the president falsely blamed Biden, his Democratic foe, for siding with anarchists, Biden, in his most direct attacks yet, accused Trump of causing the divisions that have ignited the violence. He delivered an uncharacteristically blistering speech and distanced himself from radical forces involved in altercations. Biden said of Trump, "He doesn't want to shed light, he wants to generate heat, and he's stoking violence in our cities. He can't stop the violence because for years he's fomented it." Trump blames radical troublemakers stirred up and backed by Biden, but when he was asked about one of his own supporters who was charged with killing 2 men during the mayhem in Kenosha, Wisconsin, he declined to denounce the killings and suggested that 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse was acting in self-defense, contrary to video evidence. The teenager who was illegally carrying the firearm was charged with homicide after killing 2 people and injuring a third. Trump's refusal to condemn the shootings could add to tensions in Kenosha when he visits today. He has no plans to meet with the family of Jacob Blake. In Pittsburgh, the former vice president also tried to refocus the race on what has been its defining theme: Trump's failure in handling the COVID-19 pandemic that has left more than 180,000 Americans dead. Set aside on Monday were Biden's lofty appeals about the soul of the nation, replaced by an urgent call for action and his fierce accusation that Trump was a toxic presence in this nation for 4 years, who was poisoning the values this nation has always held dear, poisoning our very democracy. But Biden didn't just play defense, he went on the attack, lambasting Trump not just for inciting violence, but for his ties to Russia and his handling of the nation's economy. For months, Trump has tried to distract from the pandemic, and at times he seemed to receive slight positive bumps in support when touting the possible economic recovery, despite the country already being in the worst recession since the 1930s. French President Emmanuel Macron has arrived in Lebanon for his second visit since a massive explosion at the capital's port earlier this month shook the country and renewed persistent calls for political change. His arrival in Beirut last night for a 2-day visit came hours after Lebanese leaders named diplomat Mustafa Adib as the new prime minister designate, tasking him with forming a government in the wake of the previous administration's resignation following the August 4th explosion. That explosion ripped through Beirut and killed at least 190 people, wounded thousands, and caused widespread damage that left hundreds of thousands of people without a home. Macron has been in direct contact with Lebanese officials since his first visit 2 days after the explosion, urging politicians to come to a political understanding, to pass through sweeping reforms and halt decades of corruption and mismanagement which led the country into its deepest ever economic crisis. Western countries see a resumption of stalled negotiations with the International Monetary Fund, as well as reforms to the electricity and financial sectors as key conditions for providing large-scale financial assistance. Senior Lebanese officials said Macron's mediation was essential in securing agreement on a new prime minister in the 48 hours before a deadlock was broken and a consensus emerged on Adib, the former ambassador to Germany. He called for the formation of a government of competent specialists in record time. The World Bank on Monday estimated the explosion caused between $3.2 and $4.6 billion in physical damage. The organization estimated Lebanon's immediate need until the end of 2020 at between $605 and $760 million, including for cash assistance, housing, and support for businesses. The Trump administration yesterday finalized its weakening of an Obamaera rule aimed at reducing polluted wastewater from coal-burning power plants that has contaminated streams, lakes, and underground aquifers. The change will allow utilities to use cheaper technologies and take longer to comply with pollution reduction guidelines that are less stringent than what the agency originally adopted in 2015. It's the latest in a string of regulatory rollbacks for coal power under Trump, actions that have failed to turn around the industry's decline amid competition from cheap natural gas and renewable energy, ignoring the climate crisis, which is on track to make parts of the planet uninhabitable. The latest rule change covers requirements for cleaning coal ash and toxic heavy metals, such as mercury, arsenic, and selenium from plant wastewater before it is dumped into waterways. Utilities are expected to save $140 million annually under the changes, but environmentalists and former EPA officials warned the move will harm public health and result in hundreds of thousands of pounds of pollutants annually contaminating water bodies. You can subscribe to 5-Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5-Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Please subscribe, rate, and review us at 5minute.news. 5-Minute News is an independent production covering politics, inequality, health, and climate, delivering unbiased, verified, and truthful world news daily.